This educational video is very specifically to address why not to let any child fall behind. Not no child left behind. The reason we don't let children fall behind. It's not okay that children fall behind. So it might fall under the auspices of No Child Left Behind, but I'm talking about falling behind. Let me tell you what I mean. I've been in education for a long time, over 25 years, and it's very hurtful. And I work so hard to correct the systemic problem where children have been presented a section of content for a period of time in which at the end of that period they are tested, whether it's an assessment, a quiz, or an exam. And with that testing assessment, the testing assessment is actually a measurement to see if the child is proficient in the area that they were taught. Now, in other countries like Finland, it's very interesting because when a child gets tested and the children show failure or that they're not proficient, the actual education system uses that as a measurement of the teacher's success. Isn't that interesting? In the United States, we use it as a measurement of the child's success. So with that in mind, a child spends 2 weeks learning certain math concepts, Monday through Friday and then Monday through Thursday. And then on Friday of the second week, a test, assessment, a quiz is given that is to measure the proficiency of that child's mastery or proficiency of the content that was taught over the 2-week period. Now, it really should be a measure of the teacher's success, but let's use what the United States suggests. Is the child successful or proficient with this information? Let's pretend the 2 weeks was based on Chapter 5's math. Chapter 5, whatever that math content could be. He takes the test on Friday. On Monday, he gets the test back and he learns that he failed it with a 50. Let's say that passing with a D- is a 70. So he got a 50. He only knew half of the content. He wasn't proficient at all, and he certainly isn't masterful, nor does he have the ability to teach another, to include a peer, what would be proficient in our measurement as a student. Unfortunately, and I've seen this so many times, the child on Monday, after the test quiz grades are handed out, the child is moved on with the rest of the students into the next section and is learning more advanced math that is predicated on what the child just showed a deficiency. Now, why does that happen? It's mind-blowing to me. So if the child hasn't shown proficiency, we need to go back, create proficiency in order for the child to move into the next section. Otherwise, we're using a theory or a model that the child can't walk, but we're going to teach the child how to jump, in the third week. It's just the child can't speak English or speak English well, but we're going to teach them advanced English. We're going to teach them advanced language. We're going to change up the language to another language. The child can't print, so regardless, we're going to teach them how to write cursive, right? So what do we do with this? Like, what happens? Well, we have to think about the measurement. What is it really measuring? There is something that is wrong in the delivery tools or the delivery system of instruction that is allowing this child to fall behind. Now, there are very legitimate reasons that may not be the teacher or educator's fault. The child may be behaviorally disturbed. He just is bouncing all over. He can't attend. He didn't even sit through the test. He was coloring things, wanted to go to the bathroom, in his chair, out of his chair. Totally right. He could have been emotionally impaired. Just refusal, just didn't want to do it. Angry, upset, stressed out, anxious, worried, depressed, head down on the table. He might have been anatomically unavailable, meaning that he was just very distressed in the respect that his stomach hurt, he had butterflies, he didn't feel well. His attention span was really, really poor. He was tired and he slept the whole period, something of that nature. He has a learning difference. He just didn't understand the way that the test format was laid out because of a learning curve that he has, and people weren't aware. There are a number of reasons why this can happen. They're so legitimate. And my goal is not to pick on anybody, other than my goal being we have to prevent this from happening. So we need to look at what interventions this child needs in order not only to properly educate the child, but to properly assess the child in the way that the child was educated. What does that mean? Well, here's a great example. We have children who have individual educational plans. And in the plans it says Johnny will get verbal instruction because Johnny has a reading impairment. And this is so frustrating because we will have Johnny taking quizzes in class and receiving all the information verbally as if, and I'm using this analogously, if he was blind. He's getting oral instruction and he takes his test orally. But then we get to a state standardized test and it might not be oral. We're going to give it to him visually. That always frustrates me. Come on, if we know that this is the way he tests best, then why aren't we going to give him the test that way? There's so many people that I know, including members of my own family, who are just very hands-on. They're just not academic. Their academics in the educational system was not their strength. So with that being said, sitting and just reading and studying out of a book is not to their strength. It's not to their liking, and it certainly isn't motivational for them. I can tell you within my family, cousins, etc., they're hands-on, they're laborers, and they're good at it. They're welders, they're fabricators, they're masons, they build cars. They owned, I know I had a family member that owned a gas station with an auto mechanic shop. But if that's how they learn, which is kinesthetically, why aren't we teaching them kinesthetically and then having them test kinesthetically? Because they had to fail their whole life to believe they couldn't go on for further education, then realize, hey, I'm really a kinesthetic kind of person, so I have to find a kinesthetic job. But because a number of my relatives didn't even get a high school diploma, they couldn't even get the job that they were potentially good at because they didn't have the credentials to show that they could be responsible even at high school level. It's very, very frustrating. It's extremely disappointing. And when we think about the emotional resilience of children, although they are more resilient, I think, than most adults, they don't have the expressive skills to be able to say to the teacher by raising their hand, hey, could you help me with this problem? Because, I just need a visual example because although I'm an auditory learner, I do really well with visual examples. How often do you hear a kid say that? Hey, could you slow the pace down because I have problems inputting the information auditorily, integrating it into my mind and my memory system from the short-term to long-term memory to then retrieve it and output the information using a visual modality. They don't know how to do that. They just put their pen down or their pencil down, they're frustrated, and they go into a refusal, or they become emotional, or they even don't want to come back to school. A lot of them have somatic symptoms. They don't feel well, they get stressed. And as I say to people all the time, when you're stressed, you lack blood flow and oxygen to your gut. That's why a lot of them have belly aches and they feel like I just can't go to that class or take that test or sit in front of that teacher. And it's not necessarily any specific person's fault. It's the way our system is designed. So it's very flawed in that respect. So what do we do about this? Well, first thing is we should teach children how they learn. Are you a visual learner? Are you an auditory learner? Are you a kinesthetic learner? I know for you learning specialists, there are other modalities for learning, but that's where I always recommend we start. And then we can break it down. You don't need all kinds of very intense learning inventories. We break it down in the way that I just showed you. Are you a person that could put this thing together and understand it, but couldn't tell us how you got there? Are you a person that can listen to what we're saying and then say it back? Then you get to the test where you have to read the directions and write it and you have no idea what to do. When we teach them how people learn, they have a greater chance of understanding their learning system to be able to learn. Then we teach them what do you do when the expectations of learning in a system that is not to your best learning modality is presented or expected of you and you're set up for failure. How do you express to a teacher that you need a different learning system? So now we're teaching them advocacy. We're teaching them bypass strategies. We're teaching them coping strategies. We need that class. Now I build these in schools all the time. But where are these classes? I mean, I'm thankful that I am offered opportunities for work. But I'd rather not have to come in and attend to a school for these issues. It's very disheartening. Let's do another one. So the child knew all the answers, but he couldn't demonstrate it on the test. He's a bad test taker. I was a bad test taker. Why are we bad test takers? Do you not know how to take a test? Isn't it amazing we use tests as assessment measures to see or measure what a child knows, but many of them don't know how to take a test, so we don't even get accurate measures of how much a person knows? Come on, we should be doing better than this. We should definitely be doing better than this. Let's train students on how to take a test. If there are 10 problems and you have an hour, you have 6 minutes per problem. I mean, if you have 60 problems and you have an hour, you have 1 minute per problem. You know, how do you go through the problems you know first and come back to the ones you didn't know, because at least you'll get credit for the ones that you're potentially best at. I mean, there's so many tools and strategies. Write down the formulas right when they say begin, so then you can use that as a visual aid when you're getting stressed, to not have to recall things like Tom Brady does with his plays on his arm. He has them recorded on his arm, the greatest quarterback of all time, because under stress, he won't be able to recall the plays. We need to give them these tools, guys. So when we're offering them compensatory measures and then attending to the way they learn best, teachers, educators, all of you will see, and mark my word on this, you're actually doing a better job teaching than you thought. The kids actually know more than you realize. They're just not able to demonstrate or express what they really know. So we want to teach them, how do they learn? What are the alternatives to learning? How do you cope with the learning alternatives or with hurdles that interfere with your ability to learn? And then lastly, how do we test people on the way that they learn the information best? So if the guy was blind and he had to learn everything orally, are you going to give him a written exam to see how much he knows? And the same thing could go the other way around if he couldn't express through talking or something. So in theory, we want to use the modalities that work best for children. By principle, we want to teach people on how to use other modalities for learning. And on practice, we want to make sure that we are complementing the children, our students, with how they learn best while we're building other systems for learning, but then testing the students on how we as educators can see if we passed, if we're proficient in teaching our children. Because when the children fail, it's actually a measurement that we're not always doing the right job. So as an educator, I have been guilty of this, and I've learned better, and I'm trying to spread this content to you so we can all work hard together and brilliant together as a team together to help develop our youth. We want them to be resilient, we want them to be immune, we want them to be well, and we want them to have great frontal lobe function so they can soon become independent and good advocates for themselves and to achieve whatever goals they set out for. Thank you for listening.